The courtroom falls silent as Judge Blackwood stares down at the woman in the wheelchair. His words drip with contempt. "I thought snipers were supposed to have excellent communication skills," he mocks, drawing uncomfortable laughter from the gallery. The decorated SEAL officer does not flinch. Instead, she reaches slowly into her bag, producing a small recorder. Something shifts in the judge's expression. Fear. Those who had been smirking moments before now sense the air changing. They do not yet understand what is happening, but they feel it. The hunter has become the prey. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more tales of justice served. The federal courthouse in downtown Boston fell silent as Judge Thaddeus Blackwood entered, his black robes billowing behind him like storm clouds. At the defendant's table, former Lieutenant Commander Wren Thoreau sat in her wheelchair, spine straight as a flagpole despite the titanium rods holding it together. Her attorney, Zephyr Holloway, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before taking his seat. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Thaddeus Blackwood," the bailiff announced, though Wren, of course, remained seated. Blackwood's gaze swept the courtroom before landing on Wren, his lip curling almost imperceptibly. "Be seated," he said, voice like gravel. As he shuffled his papers, he peered over his reading glasses. "I see we have a benefits dispute case, VA denial appeal, Miss Thoreau versus the Department of Veterans Affairs." "Lieutenant Commander Thoreau, Your Honor," Zephyr corrected respectfully. Blackwood looked up sharply. "Former Lieutenant Commander Counselor, we needn't stand on ceremony for inactive personnel." He turned a page. "Especially when said personnel are requesting additional accommodations from overtaxed government resources." The gallery shifted uncomfortably. A few veterans in attendance exchanged glances. "For the record, Your Honor," Zephyr began, "this case concerns benefits legally owed to my client under federal statute." Yes, Blackwood waved dismissively. "I've reviewed the filing. Rather thin on substantiating evidence, wouldn't you say? Let's proceed." As the preliminary motions began, Blackwood's behavior grew increasingly hostile. He interrupted Zephyr constantly, dismissed evidence with barely a glance, and addressed questions to Wren with thinly veiled contempt. "Miss Thoreau," he said, deliberately dropping her rank again, "perhaps you could enlighten the court as to why your special operations entitle you to special treatment now?" Wren's face remained impassive, but her hands, once steady enough to hit targets at 900 meters in variable wind conditions, clenched slightly on the arms of her wheelchair. She made a brief note in a small notebook on her lap. "Your Honor," Zephyr objected, "Lieutenant Commander Thoreau's service record speaks for itself. The classified nature of her operations prevents detailed disclosure, but the documentation provided clearly establishes her eligibility." "Ah yes, classified," Blackwood interrupted with a theatrical sigh. "How convenient." "The court is expected to simply take her word, I suppose." He leaned forward. "I've seen many veterans in my courtroom, Counselor. Real heroes don't typically spend their time pursuing litigation for personal gain." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Wren's eyes never left Blackwood's face, studying him with the same calm intensity she once used behind a rifle scope. Something flickered in her expression, not anger, but recognition. She made another note. The morning proceeded with Blackwood continuing his unusual treatment of what should have been a straightforward case. Each time Zephyr attempted to present evidence of Wren's service record, Blackwood found reasons to question its relevance or authenticity. "These commendations," Blackwood said, holding up a document with distaste, "are from operations so secretive we cannot verify they occurred? Am I understanding correctly?" "The operations themselves remain classified, Your Honor," Zephyr explained with thinning patience. "But the commendations are official Navy documents signed by Admiral Ravencroft herself." "Ravencroft," Blackwood muttered, something unreadable passing across his features. "Another desk admiral handing out medals like party favors, no doubt." In the gallery, an older man in a veteran's cap stood up abruptly, then sat back down when his wife tugged at his sleeve. The disrespect being shown was unprecedented, even for Blackwood, who had a reputation for being tough on military cases. Wren's composure never wavered. She sat with perfect posture, her gaze steady, occasionally writing in her notebook. When directly addressed, she answered in clear, precise language that spoke of her extensive training and education, despite Blackwood's attempts to provoke her. During a brief recess, Zephyr leaned close to Wren in a corner of the courtroom where they wouldn't be overheard. "This is beyond irregular," he whispered. "His behavior alone gives us grounds for a mistrial." Wren shook her head slightly. "Not yet," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Let him continue." "He's trying to break you down in front of everyone," Zephyr said urgently. "This feels personal, Wren." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "It is personal, though he doesn't know how much." She glanced toward the judge's chambers. "We need to let this play out." "Are you sure about this strategy?" "It's risky." Wren's gaze hardened. "Risk assessment is my specialty, counselor. Trust the mission." When court reconvened, Blackwood seemed even more determined to undermine Wren's dignity. He questioned the extent of her injuries, requesting detailed medical testimony about the IED explosion that had taken both her legs below the knee. "And you expect the American taxpayer to fund experimental prosthetics for the rest of your life?" he asked after a particularly grueling line of questioning. "Based on injuries sustained during what you claim was a classified operation?" "Objection, Your Honor," Zephyr said, standing. "The phrasing, 'what you claim,' implies dishonesty from a decorated officer of the United States Navy." "Overruled," Blackwood snapped. "The witness will answer." Wren looked directly at Blackwood. "The prosthetics in question are standard issue for military personnel with my level of injury, not experimental. My request simply asks the VA to honor existing policy." "Yes, well, policies are frequently abused, aren't they?" Blackwood remarked. "Perhaps if you'd been more careful in your supposedly heroic actions, taxpayers wouldn't be burdened with your care." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Zephyr was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, I must object in the strongest possible terms." "Noted," Blackwood said coldly. "Proceed." As lunch approached, Blackwood called for a 1-hour recess. The gallery emptied quickly, many people discussing the shocking behavior they had witnessed. Wren and Zephyr remained at their table, speaking quietly. "He's getting worse," Zephyr observed. "This is beyond judicial misconduct." Wren nodded. "He's feeling confident, thinking I'm powerless." She checked her watch. "We need to accelerate the timeline. Make the call." Zephyr slipped away to use his phone outside the courtroom. When he returned, he gave Wren a subtle nod. "It's done. Are you ready for what comes next?" "I've been ready for 3 years," Wren replied, her voice carrying the weight of a promise long made. When court reconvened after lunch, the atmosphere had grown even more tense. Blackwood seemed emboldened by Wren's apparent submission, his remarks becoming increasingly personal and inappropriate. "I suppose we're to believe these special operations were truly special," he remarked when medical documents were presented, drawing uncomfortable laughter from some corners of the gallery. "Not merely overblown reports to justify inflated budgets." Wren remained composed, occasionally making notes in her small book. When asked a direct question, she answered clearly and precisely, her voice steady despite Blackwood's attempts to undermine her. "Please speak up," Blackwood interrupted during one response. "I thought snipers were supposed to have excellent communication skills." For the first time, a flicker of something dangerous crossed Wren's face. She adjusted her wheelchair, positioning herself to face Blackwood directly. "Your Honor, may I retrieve something from my bag?" she asked. Blackwood gestured magnanimously. "By all means, Ms. Thoreau, perhaps you have actual evidence hidden away?" Wren reached into her bag and produced a small voice recorder, which she placed on the table in front of her. Blackwood stiffened. "What is that device?" "A standard voice recorder, Your Honor," Wren replied evenly. "Permitted under Courthouse Regulation 17.3, which allows assistive devices for disabled participants in legal proceedings." "Remove it immediately," Blackwood demanded, color rising in his face. Zephyr stood. "Your Honor, my client is well within her rights to use this device to assist her memory, given her traumatic brain injury sustained in service." "I made no such ruling permitting recording devices in my courtroom," Blackwood insisted, his composure slipping. "With respect, Your Honor," Zephyr countered, "the regulation is courthouse-wide and requires no specific judicial approval." As they argued, the courtroom doors opened quietly. A woman in a naval dress uniform entered and took a seat in the back row. Admiral Isolde Ravencroft's presence sent a ripple of whispers through the gallery. Several people recognized the decorated naval intelligence commander whose signature appeared on many of the documents Blackwood had dismissed. Blackwood, flustered by the recorder and unaware of the new arrival, called for a 15-minute recess. As he exited to his chambers, Zephyr leaned toward Wren. "Admiral Ravencroft is here," he whispered. Wren nodded. "Right on time." "Everything in position?" "FBI agents are standing by in the hall. DOJ has the package you sent them." Wren took a deep breath. 3 years of work comes down to the next 30 minutes. "Are you sure about this next step? Once you do this, there's no going back for any of us." Wren's eyes followed Blackwood's retreating figure. "He gave up his right to mercy the moment he took their money," she said quietly. "The same money that paid for the intelligence failure that cost my team their lives." The courtroom hummed with tension as people waited for proceedings to resume. Several noticed Admiral Ravencroft but pretended not to. Others watched Wren with new curiosity, sensing that something significant was unfolding beneath the surface of what had appeared to be a routine benefits case. Wren sat perfectly still, her training evident in her economy of movement. 3 years of planning, of careful documentation, of building networks and gathering evidence, all leading to this moment. She thought of her teammates who hadn't made it home, whose names Blackwood would never know. They deserved justice, and today, they would finally receive it. When court reconvened after the 15-minute recess, Blackwood strode to the bench with renewed confidence, though his eyes darted occasionally to Admiral Ravencroft in the back row. He straightened his robes and cleared his throat. "We will continue with the case of Thoreau versus the Department of Veterans Affairs," he announced, avoiding looking directly at Wren. "The court reminds all parties that unauthorized recording devices are prohibited." "Your Honor," Wren spoke before Zephyr could respond, "I would like to request permission to represent myself for a special motion." Blackwood paused, clearly surprised. "You wish to dismiss your counsel at this juncture?" "That seems unwise, Ms. Thoreau." "For this motion only, Your Honor," Wren clarified. Blackwood exchanged a glance with the court reporter, then shrugged. "By all means, this should be entertaining." He gestured broadly to the center of the courtroom. "The floor is yours." Zephyr leaned in close to Wren. "Remember, stick to the plan. No improvisation." "Roger that," she whispered back, a military acknowledgement. Wren wheeled herself to the center of the courtroom with practiced precision. The afternoon light from the high windows illuminated her face as she positioned herself to address both the judge and the gallery. The room fell silent, all eyes drawn to her commanding presence despite her seated position. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying easily now, "I move for your immediate recusal from this case based on undisclosed conflicts of interest that materially affect these proceedings." Blackwood's smug expression faltered momentarily. "On what possible grounds?" "On the grounds of demonstrable bias, financial conflicts of interest, and conspiracy against the United States government," Wren stated calmly, as if reading a weather report rather than leveling explosive accusations. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Blackwood banged his gavel furiously. "Order! Order in my court! This is outrageous," he sputtered. "You have no standing to make such allegations." "With respect, Your Honor, I have both standing and evidence," Wren responded, reaching into a folder that Zephyr had placed before her. Evidence gathered as part of an official counterintelligence operation authorized under Naval Intelligence Directive 1742, signed by Admiral Isolde Ravencroft. All eyes turned briefly to Ravencroft, who remained impassive in her seat, watching the proceedings with hawk-like intensity. "This is contempt of court," Blackwood declared, his face flushing. "You cannot fabricate wild accusations against a federal judge without consequences." "I agree completely, Your Honor," Wren said, her voice cooling several degrees. "Actions have consequences. That's precisely why I'm here today." From her folder, Wren produced the first document, holding it up for the court to see. "These are photographs taken on March 17th of this year at the Raffles Hotel in Singapore, showing Your Honor meeting with Dmitry Zakharov and Victor Chen, executives from Meridian Defense Systems." She handed copies to the court clerk, who reluctantly passed one to Blackwood. His face paled as he recognized himself in the high-resolution images. A business meeting during a judicial conference is hardly evidence of impropriety, he said, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. A business meeting that you failed to disclose on mandatory travel reports, Wren countered, with representatives of a defense contractor currently under federal investigation for selling classified technology to foreign entities. A contractor whose cases have appeared before your bench 7 times in the past 18 months, with rulings favorable to them in each instance. Before Blackwood could respond, Wren produced another document. These are financial records showing transfers from Meridian subsidiary accounts to offshore holdings controlled by Blackstone Consulting Group, a firm owned by your brother-in-law, Roland Blackstone. Each transfer occurred within 10 days of your favorable rulings. The gallery was now completely silent, many spectators leaning forward to catch every word. Several journalists who had been covering the routine docket were now frantically taking notes. Blackwood's knuckles whitened as he gripped the bench. These documents are clearly fabricated. I will have you disbarred for this, he said, glaring at Zephyr, who simply stood with arms folded, watching his client work. The documents are authentic, Your Honor. They've been verified by forensic accountants at the Treasury Department and the FBI, Wren said, placing another exhibit on the clerk's desk. But perhaps most concerning is this. She produced a sealed envelope with the Department of Justice logo clearly visible. This contains transcripts of phone conversations between yourself and Thomas Varga, a known intermediary for foreign intelligence services interested in American military technology. As she spoke, 4 men in suits entered the courtroom and positioned themselves near the exits. They didn't identify themselves verbally, but their FBI badges were visible on their belts. The courtroom atmosphere shifted palpably as people realized this was not a stunt or legal maneuver, but something far more serious. In these conversations, Wren continued relentlessly, you specifically discussed, and I quote, handling the sniper problem and ensuring that the woman in the wheelchair would be dealt with permanently if she continues to investigate. Blackwood's face had now lost all color. This is a setup, he said, his voice barely audible before he seemed to remember his authority. This is my courtroom. I will not be subjected to this kind of ambush. Bailiff, remove this woman immediately. The bailiff hesitated, looking between the judge and the FBI agents who had now moved closer to the bench. Admiral Ravencroft chose this moment to stand. All eyes turned to her as she walked deliberately down the center aisle, her dress uniform impeccable, medals glinting in the afternoon light. Judge Blackwood, she said, her voice carrying the weight of her rank. These materials are part of an ongoing counterintelligence operation, authorized at the highest levels. Lieutenant Commander Thoreau has been acting as a field operative with full authorization from Naval Intelligence and the Department of Justice. The revelation crystallized for everyone present. This case had never been about VA benefits. The entire proceeding had been an elaborate trap, with Blackwood as the target and Wren as both bait and hunter. That's not possible, Blackwood stammered, looking around wildly as if seeking an escape. She's disabled, for God's sake. My physical limitations became an asset to this operation, Wren explained, her voice level. You and your associates believed I posed no threat precisely because of my wheelchair. Your prejudice blinded you to the fact that my mind remains my most effective weapon. The lead FBI agent approached the bench. Thaddeus Blackwood, you're under investigation for corruption, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and potential treason against the United States, he announced formally. We have a warrant to search your chambers and private residence. You are not under arrest at this time, but I advise you to contact legal counsel immediately. Blackwood looked wildly around the courtroom that had been his domain of absolute power just minutes before. This is a setup. You cannot do this to me. I'm a federal judge. You're a federal judge who took foreign money to compromise national security, Wren said, her voice cutting through his protests. You sold out your country and contributed to the deaths of American service members, including 3 of my team. For the first time, personal emotion colored her words. Delta Team 6 didn't die because of mission failure or enemy action. They died because intelligence was compromised, allowing the enemy to prepare for their arrival. Intelligence that passed through your courtroom during the Meridian classified evidence hearings last year. A collective gasp went through the courtroom as the true scope of Blackwood's actions became clear. This wasn't just about corruption or abuse of power. It was about betrayal that had cost American lives. I never meant for anyone to die, Blackwood said weakly, the fight draining from him as two FBI agents approached the bench. Few traitors do, Your Honor, Admiral Ravencroft stated, yet they are responsible for the consequences of their actions nonetheless. As the agents escorted Blackwood from the courtroom, the atmosphere transformed completely. Veterans in the gallery stood at attention, recognizing the gravity of what they had witnessed. Others watched in stunned silence, realizing they had observed not just a legal proceeding, but the culmination of a years-long intelligence operation. Zephyr approached Wren, helping her gather the documents. "Perfect execution," he said quietly. "Mission accomplished," Wren replied, her voice betraying exhaustion now that the moment of confrontation had passed. Admiral Ravencroft joined them at the table. "Outstanding work, Commander. Your team would be proud." Wren nodded, emotion briefly crossing her face before her training reasserted itself. "What happens now?" "Now we trace the network," Ravencroft said. "Blackwood wasn't the mastermind. He was just one compromised official in what we believe is a larger operation targeting our military technology and personnel." "And the VA benefits case?" Wren asked with a hint of irony. "Officially withdrawn," Zephyr said with a smile, "though I suspect the actual benefits will be approved rather quickly after today's events." Ravencroft placed a hand on Wren's shoulder. "You've earned much more than that, Commander. The President has been briefed on this operation. There will be recognition, though much of it will remain classified." Wren shook her head slightly. "I didn't do this for recognition, Admiral. I did it for justice." The Admiral nodded in understanding. "And you've achieved it. Thanks to your work, we've exposed a significant breach in our judicial system. The damage assessment is ongoing, but you've undoubtedly prevented further loss of life." As the courtroom began to clear, many people paused to look at Wren with new understanding. The woman they had pitied as a disabled veteran fighting bureaucracy was revealed as something else entirely, a warrior who had simply changed battlefields. A young law clerk approached hesitantly. "Commander Thoreau, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. All of it." Wren nodded acknowledgement, uncomfortable with the attention but recognizing its importance for the operation's public perception. As preparations were made to leave, Zephyr revealed something few in the courtroom had realized. "Most of them don't even know that you were never the plaintiff in this case. You were always the prosecutor." Wren allowed herself a small smile as she gathered her notes. "The best operations are the ones where the target never sees the real objective until it's too late." She glanced at the now empty judge's bench, her expression hardening. "Blackwood thought he was judging me. He never realized he was the one standing trial." The corridors of the courthouse buzzed with activity as FBI agents secured Judge Blackwood's chambers. News of what had transpired spread quickly through the building, drawing curious onlookers and reporters who had caught wind that something extraordinary was happening in Courtroom 7. Inside, Wren remained at the table with Zephyr and Admiral Ravencroft as they prepared for the formal transfer of evidence to the Department of Justice team that had arrived. The Admiral's presence had transformed the atmosphere, lending official weight to what had appeared to many as an impossible accusation against a sitting federal judge. "The team will need your complete deposition," Ravencroft said to Wren. "Every detail of your investigation, from the beginning." Wren nodded. "I've maintained comprehensive records. Everything is backed up in 3 separate secure locations, with redundancies in case any one cache was compromised." "Ever the tactician," Ravencroft said with approval. "That's why you were perfect for this mission, despite some concerns about your physical condition." "My condition became my greatest asset," Wren replied. "People see the wheelchair and make assumptions. They underestimate, they let their guard down, they speak freely around someone they perceive as broken." Zephyr, who had been conferring with the lead FBI agent, returned to the table. "They want to do a preliminary interview now, while everything is fresh. Are you up for that?" Before Wren could answer, a commotion at the courtroom doors drew their attention. A distinguished man in an expensive suit entered, flanked by 2 younger attorneys carrying briefcases. His silver hair and commanding presence immediately identified him as someone of importance. "Senator Harrington," Admiral Ravencroft acknowledged with a carefully neutral tone. "This is unexpected." Senator Maxwell Harrington, chair of the Armed Services Committee, approached their table with practiced confidence. "Admiral, When I receive word that one of our federal judges is being accused of treason in open court, I take a personal interest. His gaze shifted to Wren, especially when the accuser is one of our most decorated special operators. Wren met his gaze without flinching. Senator, I wasn't aware the Judiciary Committee had been briefed on this operation. They haven't, Ravencroft interjected smoothly. The operation remains classified at Level 4. Harrington smiled thinly, which is precisely why I'm concerned about this public spectacle. Matters of national security should be handled through proper channels, not theatrical courtroom ambushes. With respect, Senator, Wren replied, this was the proper channel. Judge Blackwood's position made conventional investigation impossible. Every standard approach was compromised by his connections. Harrington's expression hardened slightly. Commander Thoreau, your service record speaks for itself, but this methodology raises serious questions about oversight and authorization. He turned to Ravencroft. Admiral, I'll expect a full briefing on this operation within 24 hours. The committee will want to know how a wounded veteran was deployed as bait in what appears to be a vigilante sting operation. There was nothing vigilante about this operation, Senator, came a new voice from the doorway. Assistant Attorney General Eliza Montgomery entered, her Justice Department credentials clearly visible. Operation Kingfisher was fully authorized under Joint Directive 1742, with sign-off from both Intelligence and Justice. The arrival of yet another high-ranking official caused a stir among the remaining spectators. The courtroom had become an impromptu stage for a drama involving the highest levels of government power. Montgomery approached, nodding respectfully to Ravencroft before addressing the senator. We've been building this case for 3 years, Senator Harrington. Lieutenant Commander Thoreau volunteered for this assignment specifically because of her unique qualifications. And what qualifications might those be? Harrington asked skeptically. Besides being a sympathetic figure in a wheelchair? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees at his callous remark. Wren's expression remained impassive, but Zephyr stiffened beside her. Perhaps we should discuss my qualifications in detail, Senator, Wren suggested, her voice carrying just enough edge to make several people shift uncomfortably. For instance, my 4 years of counterintelligence work before joining the SEALS, or my master's degree in criminal justice, or perhaps my perfect memory, which allowed me to recall specific details from classified documents that Judge Blackwood allowed to be compromised. She wheeled forward slightly. Or maybe you'd like to discuss my 3 years of dedicated work building this case while recovering from injuries sustained in service to my country. Injuries that resulted directly from the intelligence breach that we've now traced back to this courthouse. Harrington had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. Commander, no one is questioning your dedication or sacrifice. Aren't you, though? Wren asked quietly. You just implied that my only qualification was being sympathetic due to my disability. I assure you, Senator, sympathy has never been an asset in my career. Competence, however, has. Admiral Ravencroft stepped forward, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. Senator Harrington, I understand your concerns about proper channels. I'm prepared to brief you and the committee fully on this operation, which I personally authorized. But I want to be clear. Lieutenant Commander Thoreau's role was not that of bait. She was the primary operative, selected for her exceptional qualifications and personal connection to the case. Personal connection? Harrington repeated, his interest clearly piqued. The team that was lost due to the compromised intelligence, Montgomery explained, was Delta Team 6. Lieutenant Commander Thoreau was their sniper and tactical coordinator. She was the only survivor of the ambush that resulted from Judge Blackwood's actions. Understanding dawned on the senator's face. I remember that incident, Afghanistan 2021. The official report cited intelligence failure but didn't specify the nature of the breach. Because we were already investigating, Montgomery confirmed. We couldn't risk alerting the network that we were onto them. Wren's voice was steady when she spoke again. 3 years ago, I made a promise to my team as I watched them die, that I would find who betrayed us no matter how high it went or how long it took. She met Harrington's gaze directly. Today, I kept that promise. The senator studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. I see. He seemed to reassess the situation, perhaps recognizing the political danger of appearing to oppose a disabled veteran seeking justice for fallen comrades. The committee will still require a full briefing, but I appreciate the context, Commander. As Harrington and his aides prepared to leave, he paused. For what it's worth, Commander Thoreau, your team would be proud. Not many people have the fortitude to take on a federal judge, much less bring him down. After the senator departed, Montgomery turned to the small group. We need to move quickly. Blackwood's connections will already be scrambling to cover their tracks. The evidence transfer needs to happen now. While the formal procedures were being organized, Wren wheeled herself to a quiet corner of the courtroom, suddenly feeling the weight of the day. Zephyr followed, concerned. You okay? He asked quietly. That confrontation with Harrington wasn't part of the plan. Wren nodded. I'm fine. Just processing. She glanced around the courtroom that had been the culmination of 3 years of careful work. It doesn't feel quite real yet. It's real, Zephyr assured her. Blackwood is finished. The network is exposed. Your team has justice. Not yet, Wren corrected. Blackwood was just one node in the network. We still don't know how far this goes or who ultimately authorized the intelligence sale that got my team killed. One battle at a time, Commander, came Admiral Ravencroft's voice as she joined them. Today was a significant victory. The rest will come. The Admiral's phone buzzed. After checking it, she looked up with satisfaction. FBI teams have secured Blackwood's residence and a vacation property in Vermont. Preliminary reports indicate significant evidence, including encrypted communications and financial records not included in our case. He kept records? Zephyr asked, surprised. Men like Blackwood always keep insurance, Wren observed. Protection against their associates turning on them. He never expected to be caught, but he would have prepared for betrayal. As the formal proceedings continued, the courtroom gradually emptied of spectators. Eventually, only the core team remained, along with a few Justice Department officials and FBI agents cataloging evidence. What happens now? Wren asked Admiral Ravencroft as the last of the evidence was being transferred. For the operation? We expand the investigation based on Blackwood's records. For you? The Admiral smiled slightly. That depends on what you want, Commander. Your official status has been recovering while assisting in counterintelligence operations. That status can continue, or we can discuss other options. Wren considered this. I'm not done, she said finally. Blackwood wasn't the end of this. I want to follow it wherever it leads. Ravencroft nodded, seemingly unsurprised. I thought you might say that. We'll make the arrangements. Later, as they prepared to leave the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered outside. Word had spread about what had transpired, and several veterans had assembled on the courthouse steps, standing at attention. What's this? Wren asked as Zephyr wheeled her toward the exit. Respect, he said simply. News travels fast in the veteran community. As the doors opened and Wren appeared, the veterans saluted in unison. She returned the salute instinctively, military discipline ingrained despite years away from active field duty. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. They understood the significance of what she had accomplished. A young reporter broke from the small press contingent that had gathered. Commander Thoreau, can you comment on the arrest of Judge Blackwood? Is it true this was part of a counterintelligence operation? Admiral Ravencroft stepped forward. The Justice Department will issue an official statement. This remains an active investigation, and we cannot comment further. The reporter persisted, addressing Wren directly. Commander, why would you risk so much when you'd already given so much for your country? Wren paused, considering the question carefully. The faces of her team members flashed through her mind, along with countless other service members who depended on the integrity of the systems meant to protect them. The oath doesn't expire with your service, she said simply before continuing toward a waiting government vehicle. As she departed, an older man in a janitor's uniform watched from the courthouse steps. He reached into his pocket, touching what appeared to be a military medal. His expression suggested a profound understanding that there are countless unsung heroes walking among us, fighting battles most will never know about. In the car, Zephyr reviewed messages on his secure phone. They've already found connections to 3 other federal officials in Blackwood's records. This is bigger than we thought. Wren gazed out the window at the city passing by. It always was. That's why they tried so hard to silence me. They underestimated you, Ravencroft said from the front seat. A mistake they won't make again. Good, Wren replied, her voice hardening with resolve. Because neither will I. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, the events of the day rippled outward. In offices throughout Washington, phones were ringing. In secure facilities, analysts were processing new intelligence. And somewhere, the next targets of Wren's investigation were beginning to feel the first tremors of approaching justice. The battle in Courtroom 7 was over, but the war for accountability had only just begun. For Lieutenant Commander Wren Thoreau, the mission continued, with the same unyielding precision that had once made her one of the deadliest snipers in naval history. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition, but deserved more than anyone else?